What's going on, everybody? It's FREEDO here for your Overwatch. Quad Tank has been seeing a resurgence in the Overwatch League for a few reasons. Today we're going to break down why it's so good, why teams are running it, what are the benefits, what are the weaknesses, is it just a meme or is it a legit strat? Most importantly of all, I would say, it's something that you and your matchmaking games can definitely run because it's a type of team comp where the components of it have a relatively low mechanical skill floor and the skill ceiling is more or less capped out by your teamwork and coordination on how you run the comp. So you and some buddies want to stomp your way up the ladder, this is a good way to do it. Now, first and foremost, I think it's important to state why that this comp is even getting used at all. It could be said that it's more reliant on these new maps, Junkertown and Horizon, rather than its own inherent strength. But nevertheless, it is interesting when you look at the fact that we have this assumption that Mercy should have a 100% pick rate, yet the most powerful support duo in order to enable this comp is definitely Lucio Moira, which, side note, I think even more so builds credibility that that duo is going to be strong when the Mercy nerfs come through. That's a discussion for another day. For now, let's talk about the components of this team comp and why they work together. The two main ways you see it get used is as a counter strategy on Junkertown and as a point presence take on the first point of Horizon Lunar Colony. We're going to go over examples of both. In the pro scene, this big greed double sniper single support strategy has seen a lot of success. The Junkertown map design gives a lot of defensive power to the offensive team, making it really hard to flank and dive them, and the flying fortress of the pirate ship allows for a ton of greed on the attacking side with two snipers that you can't really afford to dive either because you have to focus on the Bastion first. Well, what does the quad tank do to deal with this? It gives very large meaty targets that makes the two snipers basically irrelevant. Unless Widowmaker hits a pair of big charge headshots on the tanks or if Hanzo hits a scatter, they have long periods of doing nothing. And although Bastion is very strong at chewing through the health pools of tanks, tanks are also the only characters in the game that have damage mitigation abilities. So it's not so much that we're throwing HP at the Bastion, because that's a bad idea. Anything that the Bastion can shoot, it's just going to kill. It doesn't matter how much HP you have. It's more so the defense matrix, the take a breather from Roadhog, which gives him damage resistance, the barriers and bubbles and everything else that you can get in his way to slow that down while you take out the single support and or snipers of the enemy team. Now, the typical response that you're going to see over and over again, and we're going to see on screen, is that instead of going the snipers, you just put one of them on Reaper, and it sort of just solves the problem for you, because the big problem that the quad tank team comp has is that it needs to fight in close range, and who loves that more than Reaper? Well, Reaper's just going to win 9 times out of 10 against that. The only way that the quad tank comp can deal with a Reaper is if your Roadhog player plays insane and wins the duel against him, which is possible, but not favored by any means. If you miss a hook, you're pretty much done, and that's where the quad tank lives or dies. There's 3 main positions, I'd say, for the quad tank to be very effective. You need stellar support positioning, and probably more importantly, spacing in the team fight. In the video I made about Dallas Fuel, I criticized how Custa was kind of too far away from his tanks and couldn't get all the healing. Well, your healer really needs to always be in the right place at the right time, healing multiple targets and managing their resources. That's kind of a given. The other side of things is your main tank can't make any mistakes. Whether you're running the Winston or the Reinhardt, they're in control of your most powerful shielding, and they have to stay up at all times and avoid dying. And the third, I've already kind of mentioned, but you need a star performance out of your Roadhog player. The likes of Taimu and Fleta have really shown to prove to be up to the task when it comes to landing all of Roadhog's abilities really accurately. Because the problem is, Roadhog's damage was reduced, so it used to be a lot easier to get a follow-up one-shot kill, but it's still possible now if you have stellar accuracy and really control where you place the target after you hook them, land all of your shots and all of your pellets into the hitbox. That mechanical proficiency will really allow things to shine through. And then side note, of course, D.Va getting a offensive buff recently also made this team comp a lot better because she has that damage burst potential that gives her firepower much like a DPS anyway. But like everybody else, the comp is forced to play in very close range. Okay, we mentioned the general synopsis of all the pieces, components, and possible possible counters. Now let's break down some gameplay of it working as well as it getting countered so we can see both sides of how quad tank operates. These first two clips is going to kind of be the tale of two Widowmakers. This opening, Seoul Dynasty throws the quad tank at the Bastion dual sniper setup that I mentioned earlier, and the hero of this is actually Taimu, who I think probably just does a prediction hook blindly around the corner, which if timed correctly leads for the hook to be launched out before the enemy can even realize what's going on. And I think that's what Miro fell victim to here. Forces the regroup out of Seoul, but they come back and start fighting on the cart, and although Effect does take a quite powerful flanking angle, look at the shots that he has to hit. Yeah, he probably could have hit a headshot here or there. He had just a couple seconds to do it, but the problem is Widowmaker thrives in the defensive meta, and the quad tank is in a more rushdown style of comp, where it gets in close range and just brawls out, meaning that Effect really only has a couple shot opportunities before the team fight's over. Whereas in the more cagey, defensive, ranged playstyle, Widow looks a lot stronger because you can just keep popping off ranged shots and eventually get a pick. Well, the rushdown comp of quad tank doesn't wait for that. It wants to brawl immediately, and that's actually something that Dallas Fuel uses Seoul's comp against them on in this next engagement, where they feel that aggression coming in. Taimu, Harry Hook, peel back with their big damage potential. Taimu hits a hook, Harry's able to get turreted up in a key position, and that just mows down this entire team comp. Seoul's forced to have to swap off the comp a bit later, but the big benefit is normally it feels like defense has no chance on this first point, so any team composition that feels like it can sustain or get some extra fights on the cart on first is a big victory, because otherwise the pirate ship, as we all know, can easily just sail on through the entire map. So having even a chance to compete against this really powerful team comp is a big victory. We'll come back to Junkertown later, but for now, let's look at Horizon first, which is another place where this comp is commonly used. We get to see the perspective of Shaz this time, and I really like his positioning through this fight. Staying on the hip of his tanks, not overusing his resource too much, probably a little bit more than he needs to, but even when he uses the fade, he feels that he's getting a bit ahead of them, but realizes, oh, that's not where I want to be, and comes back closer to them after they get pulled in by the Orisa halt. Now, everything looks great until FREEDO gets the angle onto the healer, and that's all she wrote. Once you take out the Moira of this comp, which she should kind of be unkillable unless a big play like that is made. I honestly believe, despite the fact of Seoul being really mechanically great and everything, if FREEDO didn't get that pick onto Shaz, that extra orb was probably going to come up, an early coalescence, and even if Seoul began to win the point, they probably would have got at least a tick out of it, and that's kind of the strategy. They just toss those bodies onto the point, force the enemy to come fight into you, and it requires quite a big performance out of the DPS to cut through these targets fast enough. But Bunny and FREEDO showed that they were up to the task in the first fight. Bunny charged up Pulse Bomb, which is just gonna destroy the clump together quad tank, and FREEDO finds his mark on the most important target, Moira, which makes this team comp crumble. But back at it again, the shoulder-to-shoulder playstyle fighting in the back here, even though iRemix didn't really get the ideal Earth Shatter here, there was a barrier blocking most of it, they're able to just sustain. And if you just keep cycling those abilities, things are going to go really well for you. And if Seoul's DPS can't pop off, if FREEDO can't find the sniper angle, and Buddy doesn't charge up Pulse Bomb fast enough, well, what do they have to kill anything? That's kind of the problem. The damage output is just too low. There's too much tanking and survivability as well as burst heal out of the Moira. Seoul's just not going to have enough damage fast enough. Now, the cool thing about watching this matchup is that as we get into second, we're able to see the big downsides of this comp and how you can go about countering it. It wants to be fighting in close spaces, so when you're able to take a fight down the lane of Junkertown or onto first of Horizon, which is one of the most claustrophobic areas to fight in on the game, it's going to look a lot stronger, but it's going to start to struggle on Horizon Point B, which has just so much range and flank, just this wide open point that if you don't take your engagement perfectly and land all your abilities, well, good luck. The Purple People Eaters, Los Angeles Gladiators, definitely know their win condition here. They are trying to focus FREEDO on the Reaper. Hydration does end up getting the kill here, but Toby's Valkyrie instant res as well as Valkyrie healing is just going to outdo the damage potential that the quad tank has. It doesn't strive in damage, let's put it that way, unless Surefour on the Zarya gets really high charge. It's all on hydration. There's nothing else to really do. A bunch of burst damage. Bishu has rocket, sure, but the problem with Zarya Beam and Diva You can see the damage coming because they are limited in their mobility, but also most of their damage is quite linear, giving you time to react before it kills you, rather than deal a big burst like the Roadhog can do. And that's kind of the issue. Going into this next fight, the Gladiators have a ton of ultimates. The only problem is Soul has a bunch of ults to counter with as well, and we're going to see how LA really needed to find the mark with their ults early, because trying to extend this fight out a little bit too long just kind of gave the engagement into the hands into Soul Dynasty. FREEDO's able to run back to spawn to get health. He has a damage angle, and this is where the Rhine shield starts to look really weak, because if your Rhine isn't blocking the key points of damage, it's really hard to justify it. Well, Bunny is able to blink past the Rhine shield, pop a pulse bomb, and FREEDO is on the backside. Rhine can't block both the Zenyatta orbs from the distance and the Reaper. Putting yourself into this corner and getting flanked kind of just wrecked the whole thing. And the problem is that was probably the push that they had to win. I think you had to find the mark with your ultimates a lot faster, even just to push them off the point. Grav, Diva Bomb, and Whole Hog is where the punching power of this comp is going to come from, and if you don't find that mark really quickly, well, it's not going to go well for you. The only problem is Zumba is one of the best defensive divas in the world, and he's probably going to be making it difficult to land a juicy Grav. And at this point, you feel kind of trapped with this team comp, because it gives you first quite easily, but going into second, it doesn't look very good. But they're going to try it again. The Big Six nearly up. Big Goose almost as sound barrier, as well as the rest of his teammates have ults as well. FREEDO looking for the counter engage from up top, and he's just sort of hanging in this fight, trying to make sure he doesn't get focused down. He knows that's what they want. They're trying to duel him, but the perfect Discord target gets selected. Jaehong puts it on the Roadhog, who's the biggest threat for the Reaper, but also the key target he wants to kill. And even through the take a breather, the focus fire is there. The Roadhog falls. Both teams expend all of their ultimates, and now it's swap up time. It is possible for Hydration to win that duel there, but it's just really hard. And you have to imagine, because Soul runs that team comp as well, they also kind of know its weaknesses, and they definitely exploited it here on point B of Horizon. Moving on, London Spitfire went up against Philadelphia Fusion on Junkertown, and Spitfire coming out with a quad tank, but they play with a Reinhardt, perhaps assuming that the Fusion's going to run their own Rhine. Nuss does get picked off early, which requires the comp to come back, regroup, but at the same exact point, kind of oddly, getting gummed up into this close range engagement is where this quad tank starts to look really annoying. And the thing is, the London Spitfire defensive tank has a lot of tanking buddies to be able to protect him, whereas Fraggy, the attacking tank for Philadelphia Fusion, only has the Diva. So the main tank battle is heavily weighted towards the defense here because they can throw the Roadhog hook and there's not a whole lot that the Fusion can do about it. Fraggy gets bursted down. There goes the whole team fight. It's really nice to see this comp work in the Mercy meta, because it kind of just goes to show you how sustained tactics can still get you victories. You don't necessarily need the Mercy bailing you out in order to win games in Overwatch. But one thing that's quite interesting is how the quad tank interacts with Junkrat, which is both popular on Horizon and Lunar Colony, which I think is a big reason why it gets run, because you have all of this defensive capabilities and AoE healing to outdo a lot of the damage he does, which you might think, well, Junkrat's good against tanks, right? He can charge up his ultimate really fast, but the problem is Tyre wants to hit a squishy target, not a tank. Even if it like demechs the Diva, Diva's got a ton of armor, the supports are really slippery. If you're running the Zarya, you're gonna have bubbles. If you run Roadhog, which you should, take a breather is gonna counter it, and it becomes just kind of a problem for the Junkrat team, where it almost looks like back in the Ana meta way back in the day, where all of the big damage you can do towards the tanks just charges up the support ult. Sure, you get an ult out of it, but it's not going to end up wiping them anyway. After realizing this and getting in a really big awkward brawl, they open up the fight with Poco's ultimate, and as long as the 2-2-2 team comp has the space to kind of crossfire into the multi-tank, they're going to be able to find the damage. It's when the multiple tanks are able to shield and block for each other in a close ranged environment, that's when it starts to look really good. But the double damage amp starts to come through and win once they have angles onto the targets to avoid the barriers and damage mitigation of the tanks. Well, that's going to be it for today's breakdown video. Quad tank is a crazy team comp That is sort of a break glass if necessary type strategy that you can pull out on some of these really difficult points to either hold or take. And thanks to the power of Moira right now, as well as how good tanks have always been, it's a strat that if other things just seem to not be working for you, just pull out the just throw more bodies on the objective and see if that just works, because it's the type of strat that's a bit easier to run and it requires the opponent to pick the right counters and get the multiple angles, split you up, pick the Moira, things like that. It forces the enemy to make the play and can guarantee some free objectives and possibly some free wins if you play it right. If you enjoyed the video and you found it useful, please leave it a like. It really does help us out and lets us know that you're enjoying the content. If you haven't already, please subscribe because we upload each and every day. So go on and hit the bell icon so that you get notified when our videos go live. Link to the description is our Twitter, where we tweet out news, updates, and dank memes. That's been it for me. I've been FREEDO for Your Overwatch. I'll see you guys next time.